and embracing the liberty that we have come to know and love as Americans. Embracing and understanding our rights and our obligations as given us by our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. Getting back to the heart and soul of what makes America tick. When I was about 8 years old, I was riding in the car in the station wagon. It was really like a Chevy Chase Vacation, if you've seen National Lampoons. And I was in the back of the station wagon, kind of shimmied in between the back seat where I was and the back of the station wagon. There were suitcases piled a mile high. We were coming back from a family vacation in Valdosta. It's about 12 o'clock at night. It's in the middle of the night. I am sound asleep in the back seat, just minding my own business. And all of a sudden, a white-tailed deer jumped out in front of our car. Now, when you don't see that coming, and when do you ever see a white-tailed deer jumping out in front of your car, you do the immediate response, which is what my father did, which was slam on the brakes. And I was unceremoniously buried alive under an avalanche of suitcases. And I share that story with you because in my mind it is a valuable metaphor right now of what is happening to us as a nation. We are getting buried alive by irresponsible fiscal policies, and we don't know which way to look. We look around us. And the effort that's being put in front of us right now is more or less of a blitzkrieg against our own ability to see what's in front of us. We are being hit with so many policies that we can't respond. We don't know where to look and what to respond to first. So the idea is that we'll throw our hands up and say, you know, this is impossible. I give up. But we are not here because we give up. And we are not Americans who give up. We're Americans who stand and fight for liberty and independence. And the fight is not always to the strong, but to the brave. And the fight in this case is not a fight of bayonets. It's a fight of intelligence. It's a fight of understanding. It's a fight of educating ourselves as Americans and our elected representatives. Per Bach was a Danish physics and biologist who about 10 years ago came across a concept that was really new to the field of physics, had not been explored all that much before. And the concept dealt with a theory he called the sand pyramid theory, the sand avalanche theory. What he did was he was thinking in his mind one day, addressing a question of what would happen, how many grains of sand would have to be placed on a pyramid of sand before you get an avalanche. How many grains of sand would you have to put on there? And so he was trying to determine that and trying to do that in a controlled environment. It's a very simple question, but as it turns out, when you're dealing with physics, it's very difficult to get to the bottom of a lot of times. And so he started doing a series of experiments. He literally calculated, and he had a computer to help him with this, calculate and individual grains of sand dropped on top of this sand pyramid. And he ran a series of tests, and what he realized was that you could not determine when that sand pile was going to fall. And this was a concept that was revolutionary in physics. Because physics, as a lot of folks know about economics, is all about determining cause and effect relationships. How much of this to create this? How much of this before this happens? And what he determined, what he realized in this experiment was that you could not rely on that. Because controlling for all the variables as you thought you could, you still couldn't determine when the avalanche was going to take place. You get me? And so he's up here doing this, and what he realized was a concept, and he called it organized instability. It sounds contradictory, doesn't it? He was sitting in Cambridge, Massachusetts with one evening at a dinner party, having done all of this research, a real challenge to the field of science, and he was sitting with a bunch of members from the scientific community, from the National Academy of Sciences, and he was listening to the back and forth conversation, and at some point in this process, he'd had enough. Because he was a man who dealt in a world of science, experimental and experiential science, that dealt with risk. And he was a man that said, if science has a place, it is in asking questions, taking risks, experimenting, coming up with, formulating a hypothesis and coming up with the best hypothesis you can, and then observing what was going on in front of you. And what he realized about the scientists that he was dealing with in that room was that they weren't from that train of thought. So he postulated a question to him. He said, "Bugs, why do you do science? And why is it that out of the great scientific communities in this country and the great universities, there are a very small percentage of amazing breakthroughs given the amount of financing we get from the federal government and the like? There's an inequality here. If you can explain this to me, I would love it." And they looked back at him and said, "Well, Pierre, quite frankly, a lot of it's determined by the funding that we receive, and it's determined by our arguments for the funding. And quite frankly, if we did not find something to pull ourselves together around, the scientific community would fall apart." It was a moment of honesty. And he looked back and said, "Well, then there's my answer. You sacrificed science for the community and for an emotional feel-good. I'm here to take risks. And I've landed upon a theory here that's asking some painful questions." And honestly, when I think about that right now, I think of a lot of financial market puppeteers in Washington that are playing games with the economic models. We had TARP 1 back last year, and this pulls the Bush administration into it. TARP 1 was a response to the housing crisis. We were going to stabilize the markets. We were going to stabilize the banking industry because people were defaulting on their mortgages. And so we were going to infuse it with liquidity. Remember all this? We were going to infuse liquidity in the market. We were going to free up credit so we could start spending money again. And what we realized was the money did not do what we expected it to do. Right now, the reports just came out just yesterday, quite frankly, a couple days ago in the Wall Street Journal. Right now, subprime mortgages are not in the trouble that they were in the earlier part of the year, but guess what is? Prime mortgages right now are in trouble. Because in a lot of ways, the money being infused into the marketplace was geared towards subprime, yes, and some to subsidize jumbo loans and raise the level of a jumbo loan so that you could get into a bigger home. And these prime mortgage recipients are losing their jobs, and we're losing our jobs across the landscape. This goes without saying, but we are all hurting as Americans right now based on the economic recession that we are in. And what they're realizing now is that you can strain all you want to control the marketplace in your omniscience as a government official. And you can't save us from ourselves. And the government cannot save us. And this was a free market principle that our founding fathers based our free market form of economics on. Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations came out in 1776, ironically the same year that our Declaration of Independence was signed. And it's a fascinating thing. What free market economics does is that you allow the marketplace to respond. That monopolies, to some degree, are taken care of because you have innovation. And when you infuse innovation from we, the people, into the marketplace, you have to respond to it. If I'm a company that doesn't respond to it, I lose market share. This is simple economics. And so what we've seen, though, is a continual infusion of taxpayer money that we did not agree to into the marketplace. And we throw up our hands in Congress and wonder why this is not working. Why can we go back and review executive pay at a place like AIG when Tim Geithner did this earlier this year, the Treasury Secretary, and we say we're going to repeal the guaranteed executive pay that we had agreed to pay these executives for staying on the job and doing what they were to do to keep the company afloat and to keep the industry, to some extent, afloat. We pulled that away. And what was it? 1 week later that Tim Geithner stood up and said, well, we are not going to pay out your executive